We have reasons for thinking S thinks, and we clearly do. So does S. Exactly the same facts we have. That's not in question. I am not now questioning the fact that we all have thoughts. That's not the issue. The issue is the epistemological question of how do you know it? And in particular, if you know it of yourself, what special reasons do you have to think you think that I can't have? Of course, we, and therefore S, have reason to think S is a thinking being. What's in question is whether there are any facts that indicate this to be so that S has exclusive access to. Facts or conditions that S is aware of that we can't be aware of, at least not in the direct and authoritative way that S is. Is there anything S is aware of that others can't be aware of that gives S an evidential edge on questions about whether S has thoughts? Now, one way to proceed in an investigation of this sort is to look at how we learned we think. We all think before we ever discover what thinking is. Before we think we think. So at some point in time, or during some phase of childhood, we learned we think. How did we learn this? Who taught us? Parents? Did we take their word for it? Were we already aware of our own thoughts as we were of the dishwasher and television, and merely had to learn, as we did with ordinary household items, what to call them? Now, I'm going to look at that in some detail about how children learn this. But before I do, a word or two about just what I'm counting as thinking. Like Descartes, I mean to be pretty inclusive. Any description of a person that requires that person to think or be able to think, that's so-and-so, in the everyday sense of the word think, will be considered a form of thinking. This includes not only thinking in the everyday sense, when we say, I think someone's following me, but all the so-called, what philosophers call propositional attitudes. Believing that P, judging that P, knowing, perceiving, seeing, hearing, and feeling, doubting, remembering, regretting, being sorry, hoping, intending, wanting, and imagining that so-and-so. Even pretending that so-and-so, that a banana is a telephone, for instance, which very young children can do, pretend, will count as a form of thinking on this broad construal. One doesn't, of course, have to think, not in the narrow everyday sense, that P, to wonder whether P, imagine that P, or pretend that P, but one cannot, not literally, doubt that P, wonder whether P, or imagine that P, or pretend that P, without being able to think that P. In this broad, inclusive sense, then, thinking is doing something that creatures lacking the capacity for thought can't do. Sensations, and here I'm thinking of pains, itches, tickles, hunger, thirst, emotions, anger and fear, moods, elation, depression, they don't qualify as thoughts, although these feelings and emotions and moods may well combine with thoughts to yield composite states that qualify as thoughts. I'm thinking of such things as anger that she left, or fear that he will fall. Those, I take it, are a combination of thought-like mental states with emotional states. I will continue to speak of one's reasons for thinking one thinks, but given this inclusive and broad understanding of what a thought is, our query could be put, what reasons, to which one has exclusive access, does one have for thinking one can think in the narrow, everyday sense of the word think? One final terminological matter before I address the problem. In speaking of thoughts, fears, perceptions, and so on, one can be speaking either of what one thinks, the content of the thought, or what is often called the act of thinking, that which distinguishes my thought that today is Wednesday from your thought that today is Wednesday. If we're both thinking that today is Wednesday, the content of our thoughts is the same, but of course our act of thinking it is different. I will always try to make it clear which I intend to be referring to when I talk about someone's thought. All right, with this understanding then, let's imagine a normal 3-year-old, I'll call her Sarah, who thinks, but hasn't yet learned that she thinks. That one thinks is something, psychologists tell us, that one only comes to fully understand around the age of 3 or maybe 4 years old. Sarah isn't quite there. She thinks Daddy is home. That is what she tells Mommy. That is why she runs to open the door when she hears a car pulling the driveway. What Sarah tells Mommy is, what else? What she thinks, what she knows, what she hears, that her father's home. She does not, however, think she thinks it. She may use the words think, know, or hear, in describing herself, but if she does, she doesn't yet fully understand that what she's giving expression to is a fact about herself, a subjective condition having a content, what it is she thinks, that may not actually be true. She will, however, soon acquire this knowledge. How and from whom? Well, no doubt from parents, teachers, older siblings, and friends. If one doesn't actually teach children this, if they merely absorb it in the way children acquire their native language, it is nonetheless from others, or at least with the help of others, that Sarah will learn that what she has been telling them is what she's been thinking, what she believes, what she sometimes even knows. It is from or with the help of other people, and perhaps from a few disappointed expectations, that she will learn that she has thoughts that usually depict the way things actually are, but sometimes fails to correspond to the facts. In the process, she will learn that her behavior, and of course the behavior of others, can be explained not only by the fact that her father is home, Sarah already understands that, but by the fact that she thinks her father is home. Something Sarah will learn that can exist in her and can explain her rush to the door without her father actually being home. As Jonathan Bennett once put it in describing what psychologists have learned about child development, a 2-year-old predicts and explains another person's behavior on the basis of what she, the child, thinks is true. A 4-year-old does so on the basis of what the other person thinks is true, or what the child thinks the other person thinks is true. To reach this level of sophistication at the age of 4, one has to understand, as 2-year-olds typically do not, what it means to think something's true. That is why normal 2-year-olds do not understand the behavior of someone who goes to the door when no one's at the door. A 4-year-old will understand this. The person went to the door because the person, but maybe not the 4-year-old, thought someone was at the door. To understand what kind of access we, those of us who think we have thoughts, have to our own thoughts, and thus what kind of reasons we have for thinking we have them, it's instructive to consider the kind of access Sarah, a person who doesn't think she has them, of course she doesn't think she doesn't have them either, has to her thoughts. I said above that Sarah told her mother that her father was home and rushed to open the door because she thought he was home. Now, it might not have been her father she heard pulling in the driveway, but Sarah thought it was, and the fact that she thought so explains why she behaved that way. If she had thought instead that it was the mailman, she wouldn't have told her mother that her father was home. She wouldn't have rushed to open the door. Sarah's thoughts and desires explain her behavior in exactly the same way our thoughts